Good morning. It's still morning. This was an amazing keynote talk, and everything that we went through, and then landing on the story from Novartis to me was like really awesome. So happy to introduce you guys with the folks from Novartis, introduce you guys to each other. It's really nice to see that we have a bunch of friends here. Right? So I know most of you. If I don't, I'd love to learn to know you. I'm Evie Cohen. I'm the Global Lead for Life Sciences. And I definitely know we have some slides here, but this is really more about Naum and Jesse telling us the story that is part of the day-to-day work that they do and how they're leveraging apping capabilities to get some of the work done. And from that perspective, we're gonna jump into a story. I'm gonna introduce both individuals. And I need the clicker on the podium, sorry. There you go. So I'm gonna introduce them, and then we're gonna jump after about 15, 20 minutes of learning their story into a panel discussion. We're gonna get on the stage and just talk a little bit. I have some questions that I prepared. They're pretty challenging questions. The speakers don't know the questions. No, I'm just kidding. I gave it to them before the weekend.
I'm gonna run away.
I gave it to them before the weekend just to think a little bit. But the intent is really to, yes, hear the story, but also hear some of the challenges. Because we're here in an audience of people that understand this is not easy. Let's make sure that we also get some learning as we go through the story and understand what are some of the challenges they faced. We have a few individuals, Savannah here, which also might chime in as well on the third row, fine. And other than that, let's just jump right in. So of course, we need to make sure that everybody understands the content presented. No, I'm not gonna read this, it's okay, fine.
Just as Michael said, we have lawyers too.
Yes, we're gonna jump back to that slide in a second, but now Associate Director of Clinical Data Management, and then Jesse as the Senior Specialist of Clinical Data Management, both work in the clinical quality space. What is clinical quality? Well, they'll explain a little bit of that. And the important thing is that this clinical quality must operate in a GxP environment, so in a regulated environment. And with that context also, it's very important for them to be able to follow very strict procedures and how they implement systems, et cetera. And with that, I'm going to jump back to the previous slide and let you start.
Thank you. So I know a lot of you know who Merck is, but some of you don't, right? So Merck is a biopharmaceutical company who's driven by the desire to improve lives, and this is something that was that goes back to 1891, where our U.S. founder George Merck, who's in the picture there, said medicine is for the patients, and that's something that we still follow today. Medicine is for the patients, and every day when we wake up, our focus is to help. Whatever we do is to deliver, and will end up in the hands of our patients at some point. George Merck actually founded in the U.S. When he was 23 years old. And we're headquartered in Rahway, New Jersey. We operate over 140 countries. And our focus has always been innovate, health solutions, oncology, vaccines. And that's something that I think being new to Merck, it's something that I learned and I'm actually proud. And it's something that I wake up every day and say, okay, I have something that will help other people. And I myself, I'm a patient, I'm a diabetic, I'm a type 1 diabetic. And when I was diagnosed, it was challenging, but then it was something that I got used to it and actually turned something that was negative into something that was positive. And that's just a quick 2-minute note of who's Merck. I'm going to hand that over to Naum, who's going to be talking more about our processes in clinical studies.
Thank you, Jesse. And thank you, everybody, for
2 slides
showing up today. So I'm going to give a brief overview about what we do and the challenges we've gone through and the current process that we have, how that relates to working within the GxP environment and trying to implement an agile process, right? So we are in the clinical change management space. We have an application that manages those clinical changes. What that means is we manage those processes that effectively implement the management and all the way up to the implementation of those changes to the trials themselves, right? So that brings up our framework in terms of how the application is set up to help the end users go through those changes and manage them effectively from an end-to-end process. And there's different components associated to different types of changes that we do manage. With that, we bring the strategy of collaboration. We have many functional areas that are collaborating on this types of changes. It's an involved process. Sometimes we have processes that are up to 100 tasks along, and there's a lot of collaboration, and that's the culture that we're bringing into this space, making sure that all stakeholders have visibility into the process. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's informed, and the changes are managed properly. So more specifically about the application, we have three components that make up our application. It's the standard libraries changes, clinical trial changes, and demand management. As the name says for the standard libraries, this is a component that is used for managing any changes required to standard libraries. And these are libraries that are used for building clinical trials, and they contain everything from the setup of the trial, and it could include some of the logic of how the data is managed within those trials. So all those aspects are built into these libraries, and any changes required will go through the standards process, making sure that all the steps are properly implemented. So again, all the functional areas do work together collaboratively, making sure an end-to-end process is implemented and followed properly. Similarly, on the clinical trial space, there is changes that are usually related to changes that arise either from any issues found during the trials or any changes that might need to be required to be implemented. But sometimes we do have also changes rising up from the standard library change. So these also shift into the trial management. And here's where actually the trial teams work similar to what we do. And they have their own SDLC process where they go through development, testing, even implementation, right? They do all their impact assessments and any approvals that are required as part of these changes. So all that is implemented within the application and is managed within this one component. The last component is the data management, and this is kind of a supporting component that helps any other general requests related to standard libraries or clinical trial changes, but not falling within those components that they're managed here. So anything could be testing issue management, or any questions or follow-ups related to the trial changes would be managed here within this component. We also manage our demand intake as part of this process. So what that means is we bring in any requests for new functionality, so any new capabilities or changes to our existing functionality that are required. We bring it into this request demand management, and we do the assessment, and that eventually falls into our demand backlog for the application, which leads into being brought into subsequent releases as necessary. So that is the application that we're working within. Now, talking about GxP, and this is kind of a little bit of an anxiety moment for some of us. How do we build a GxP with Agile for clinical data management, right? So just for a background first, what is GxP? It's the regulations designed to guarantee safety, effectiveness, and usability of medical devices, drugs, and other life science products. So there's different types of good practices. For us, obviously, we fall within the good clinical practices, so we are within that GCP space. And we need to make sure that anything that we do is properly documented as per required from the regulatory agencies. And we need to make sure we have that trackability of any changes and being properly documented and archived. The regulatory agencies do come up with inspections and audits, so we have those frequent, so we need to make sure we're in proper guidelines of everything that we do, or this could have, you know, disastrous consequences for ongoing trials, and that would effectively affect all our patients, right? So Jesse is going to talk about more in detail about the agile approach that we are taking, but in general, what we found in our space is that bringing the validation-driven approach very helpful in implementing the agile process itself. What this means is we try to bring in validation as part of every step throughout the SDLC process. So we kind of go through and have a continuous validation from development all the way up to implementation. This helps us react to issues much faster. It eliminates any rework that might be needed, and it just helps us keep up timelines and become more efficient within our process. So I'll hand it over to Jesse and talk about the agile approach.
Thank you. So, Nam mentioned agile, and for some of us, it's something that's newer. For some of us, it's something that you guys have been doing for a very long time. Agile has the similarities to the traditional waterfall method, but it definitely has its differences. In the traditional waterfall method, you had projects that could have run for years. You spend months gathering requirements. You spend months during development. But with Agile, the approach is definitely different. With Agile, you're able to combine all that. You're able to work within sprints. And that's more aligned to one of the methods within Agile. There's several methods within Agile. And one of the ones that we've been using is Scrum. With Scrum, you're able to bring a team together, bring users together, build trust, build requirements, and deliver and have that adoption. And in the previous slides that Nam introduced, he kind of drove us to our application and how we were able to align all that into, now we have 1,600 users. We have 15 different business areas. How do we change it on them, right? So it all started with definitely problem statement. The clinical trials process was very involved. Like I said before, there was multiple business units participating in the clinical studies, and then it was a challenge managing those clinical trials. So there was definitely a vision, and that vision was to transform at the time a manual process and bring it into a digitalized process and make it a reality. And that's where agility comes in. And our approach was to establish an efficient workflow that definitely involved our stakeholders. And we have built a trusting relationship with our development teams, with our business partners. And Agile has helped us because within Agile, now you're able to talk about requirements. You're able to talk to the development team, and they're able to develop something. And at the end of a sprint, which is typically around 2 weeks, you're able to demo that to the users. And that's something that with the traditional approach, it was something that users needed to wait a very long time. Now with an Agile, you're able to show it to the users. Typically, it's on a demo, playback demo is typically called, and they're able to give feedback to us and say whether they like it or not. And based on that, we're able to transform that process and then, be able to keep updating our system and be able to deliver at some point. Typically right now, we're trying to push for quarterly releases. Some of our releases have been extended, I'll be honest, but that's the push. We're trying to combine development efforts and testing efforts, and right now one of the biggest challenges, as not mentioned, is the UAT efforts. So I just walk you very fast around our agile approach. So how does that transition to Appian? How did we make our selection of Appian, and what was our solution? And this goes back to prior to when I joined, and even prior to Nam joining the project. The project started around 4 years ago, and our team members were looking to do a transformation. They were looking for a product where they were able to digitize a manual process, and they looked into a suite of enterprise products. And I believe they met Doug at some point, and Doug put us in contact with Appian, and Appian gave the team at the time a very good overview of its capabilities around its workflow, its local orchestration, flexible, fast creation of processes, its flexibility, ability to quickly adapt and then meet stakeholders' needs, and even additional things around process automation and analytics. Even within process automation, the ease of extension to other tools, plugins, that's something that they love. Analytics, of course, in the business, you love analytics, you love your reports. And Appian has those capabilities, the dashboards. And that's something that they loved, and that's something that they turned a vision to something that was real. And then that's something that we've been working on the past 4 years. On us, is close to 2 years. And we've been trying to drive that vision and then keep pushing for change, or actually orchestrating for change. That's the word I'm going to be using now.
Awesome.
Orchestrating for change, and it's something that I think it's been definitely great. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to ask you guys to step up and take your chairs, please. And we're going to actually convert it to a very interactive session. I'm going to start asking some questions, but while we ask the questions, please think of your own questions. I might actually call on a few people in the audience, so stay tuned. But with that, I want to ask by show of hands, slide number 7, so we're talking about clinical quality, right? Slide number 7 had a flaw. Who noticed the flaw in slide number 7? Well, I mean, there was a slide with a flaw in it. All right. So the challenge is the slides were not developed with Appian. So that's why, there was a slide actually there where the text overlay a little bit onto the piece of it. I just noticed it when we were standing here, but I did not notice it over
too.
We worked on these for a while. Other people saw it. Marissa saw it. Everybody saw it, right? And we all missed it. But that's the challenge, right? And that's only with creating some slides. So when we go
production bug.
So when we go to basically dealing with clinical quality, you can understand that the challenge is really, really immense, right? From that perspective, there's a lot of different things. And some dear friends of mine, Jonathan Rowe and a few other folks that started the whole clinical quality space years ago at Pfizer. This area is very near to and dear to my heart because it really helps us to create better, solid clinical trials. And these folks here are helping those teams to continue delivering on that mission and on that critical aspect of what we do in the space of clinical trials. But with that, we're going to go ahead and ask you a few questions. So I did already share the secret that we gave you the option to actually look at this.
You should have said that.
And what's the impact of your work and the work you've done with Appian at Merck in terms of patients? So can you tie that to patients? And also, to some extent, can you tie that to revenues at Merck, right? So does your work simply improve process, reduce compliance, which are great, important keys, but also does it tie into revenues? But we'll start maybe with you, Jesse. And patients, of course.
I think, thinking about it, I think there's definitely an impact to our patients, because this is all around clinical trials, and our clinical trial teams use this Appian as their process to track of the certain steps or guidelines that they need to follow. So at an Appian level, there is definitely an impact. As far as revenue, I would say there is an indirect impact to revenue, because our clinical teams, they work on clinical trials to being able to get those studies approved by the FDA. So if it gets to a point where it's approved to the FDA, there will be revenue associated to that.
Okay,
So there is.
So is your work tied in a way where it's less about can I accelerate a trial, but can I prevent hiccups or challenges, or even the elimination of certain data, which may then eliminate the success of a trial in that context?
Both.
Yes.
Both.
Okay. All right. Now, you want to add anything to that?
Just one thing in relation to the benefits to the business of all this is
Okay.
With the implementation of Appian and the processes that we implemented, right, that's a long way ahead, a big step in terms of how trial change management was originally being done. And this cut down the time required to do those changes drastically. So that is a big benefit to the business in terms of how they manage changes and being able to get that
actually an acceleration or shrinking of some of the timelines.
Yep.
Amazing, important impact. What were some of the aha moments or like surprises? You shared a slide at the end here with what were some of the selection criteria for Appian as you were delving into, or I think you guys you were not part of the decision, but you inherited some of this 2 years into the project and have been working now 2 years. Were there any positive aha moments? I'll ask about the negative in a second. Positive aha moments that you actually encountered as you were working through this? Like, oh, wow, I didn't know we can do this with software or something like that.
One thing that's really good with Appian is that we found out is it's very easy to develop wireframes.
Okay.
That they're quickly developed, they're somewhat functional too. It's easy to present to the end users of what the solution will look like before even development starts. And that's a real benefit in terms of figuring out what the user interface would be and then going through the usability of the product. Because eventually it's all about the end user, right? We develop something that has the capabilities, but it has to be usable and it has to benefit the business the way they do their processing. And it has to align to their process and make it easier to complete.
Okay. Jesse?
No, I think that that's definitely one of the greatest things I've seen around Appian, because now you're able to bring in the users with you. I mean, we could talk about requirements for an hour, 2 hours, and still don't understand what that requirement will be. But then bringing along Appian and being able to see a screen come alive based on those discussions, now you are able to see something, and people are more visual. And that's something that I've always have tried to use for my benefit, right? Especially around user experience. And for me, that's one of the things that I love the most about Appian, being able to see a screen, at least how it looks, without taking into consideration any processes that are happening behind the scenes.
Look, if I take the model of me and my wife and how we communicate, So that's exactly the issue, right? You can't, fine. So I think everybody can understand. So with that, let's turn to what are some of the learning moments that you had. So some surprises, and tell us whether you were able to get through those, or are you still in the process of trying to understand, and how can we all leverage some of these learnings from you guys? So I think we discussed some of that, so please.
I think one of the learning moments was the way that Appian handles its code versioning from environment to environment. Coming from other industries and coming into a new product such as Appian, and comparing it to other tools, we noticed that code versioning was different to what we're accustomed to.
Okay.
And this was something that was, oh wow, this is different. But it was something that with Jeff and Savannah's help, they kind of walked us through the process. Like, this is how Appian does it. And we actually have a trained team that manages the way code versioning happens within Appian itself.
Okay. So I'd like Savannah, if you can, and you're going to have to raise your voice, please, a little bit, but a little bit of, oh, there's a mic. There you go. So Savannah, just introduce yourself real quick for the audience.
I got her in trouble.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
So thanks to the audio team, because I forgot to tell them we need a mic, and they were like, poof, there you go.
I'm Savannah Beck. I'm a technical delivery manager here with Appian. And shameless plug, we are presenting in the next session with Merck as well. But yeah, Appian uses trunk-based versioning, and we worked closely with Noam and Jesse to help them with their deployments and getting that in order so that they can know and have confidence which version is in each environment.
Mm-hmm.
If I could add one more thing.
Please, please.
I think it's really important in the context of what Jesse and Savannah were saying, is it's really important to have a development team that is really knowledgeable in the Appian ways of working. So they need to really embrace that working so that that type of implementation could be followed. Otherwise, all kinds of issues it could be run into if you have a development team who's not used to that type of adjustment, let's just say. So I think that's really important to have.
I think the other thing also is there's a lot of best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are actually documented in Appian documentation, so it's also about knowing where to go to find stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a good amount of tacit knowledge, just people who have done this for a while and know, and don't be shy to reach out and ask, you know, so your TDM or others, it's really about having that communication to make sure, and that's like with any software implementation. Like, make sure that you bring the QA people in time, you know, make sure you bring other folks in the process in time. So with that, I'll allow the audience to actually ask some questions. Somebody in the back over there, please give us your name and what company you're with.
Thank you. Congratulations. That was really good. So I'm Dinesh. I'm all the way from Sydney. So I'm the head of workflow for one of the large bank over there.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Okay. So the question that I have, so we are sort of in a 2 years journey, and we have had exactly the same experience. The build in Appian is significantly faster. But then cutting down the release cycle, we have to do like end-to-end testing, UAT and all that. That pretty much takes chunk of the time. And you also said that you want to move your releases to quarterly. So what are your experiences? What are the areas that you are working on? Are you working on test automation and changing the behaviors to be able to improve your release cycles?
I think one of the main things that we're doing is working as one team and creating collaboration across, right? And building that trust. When it comes to testing aspects of it, we're trying to also use automation to help us speed up that process, with scripting. So right now it's, I guess, at the beginning stages of doing that. So I guess in the future we could further discuss if we were successful or not.
Okay. George. Mike is coming.
We're recording this. So
Oh, gosh. All right. Hi, George Hines with Appian. Jesse, thank you for referencing your type 1 diabetes. My daughter has type 1 diabetes, and she's very shy about it. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to mention it to her that during the presentation you mentioned it, just to give her some confidence that it's okay to share that with people. So thank you for that. You had mentioned that this happened or started 2 years ago. When did you first go live?
2021.
So what rev are you on at this point? So 2 years into it, and my question is really about that ability to change and make the adoptions. One of the things we like to talk about with Appian is that you can change it as easily as you can build it. So the question or the proof in the statement I'm looking for is, have you seen that experience, and is that true?
So, as not mentioned earlier when he was presenting, we have 3 modules. Our first module went live in 2021. It started in 2020. It took around a year. Our second module took another 10 months. Yep. 10 months. And our third module, within our second release and our third release, there was updates and enhancements to the previous releases. So at that point, I believe we were around 7 months of delivering. Then the last module, I think that's when we really started working from the beginning. We were able to do development in around 3 months, but then with some hiccups around production and all that, and then bringing in testing, I think we were able to do 5.5 months if our last module.
So each release got faster and faster,
Yeah.
so to speak. Thank
And
you.
who's actually working on these changes? Are you working with a partner, or is this yourselves?
We're working with a partner.
Okay, fine. So did you find it challenging to work with the partner? How does the partner actually work with the users as well, or do you translate some of the requirements and you very much
Translate the
facilitate?
requirements.
Okay, so you really work very closely there.
Yeah, we're really situated on the business side, but
Okay.
we're kind of more on the technical side. So we kind of go between the development team and the IT and liaising with the business.
I think
On
that's a
our
really
side.
important role to have, right?
Right.
Because you understand the users, but you also understand what it takes to actually.
Correct.
implement it.
Sometimes there's a misunderstanding
Yes.
if end users go directly to developers and start talking about what they think things should happen. And development usually just jumps to that opportunity and starts building something that's not necessarily the best thing. So we need to kind of intervene and be the mediator between best user experience and best process design.
Yeah.
So that's where we
I
stand
I
in.
need a faster horse.
Think of us as a product management team within the business. We have technical experience, and we work on the business. We create a very good relationship with our business users, and that has allowed us to turn those requirements and communicating them properly to our development teams.
Okay, so throughout the conference, we talk about speed. We're actually going to see a very nice presentation this afternoon about how you can develop with speed. That's correct, that's true. And we also have our Appian guarantee, which in 8 weeks we can deliver. But you can also understand that there's going to be some implementations that do take months, a couple of years to develop because it's complex. And I'm sure that where you landed after 2 years is not where you started. And that's the important, right? Because you don't know where you want to go completely. You have a general understanding of the mission that you're on from the perspective of building, but where you're going to arrive is going to be in a different place. And it's continuing to evolve even now. So I think that's really, really important to understand. You need to be able to have the platform grow with you as well. It's the software that supports what you need to do, not the other way around. You don't want users to have to fit themselves to the software because the way you work changes. Any additional questions? Gabe, please. So the mic is coming.
Gabe Monetti from Fortria, a large CRO based in Triangle, North Carolina, and a partner of Merck for many years. My question for you is about extending this to your universal providers. So if you've given any thoughts to how providers like CROs could be embedded in your processes using these tools, or even further, how we could collaborate at a platform level to co-create value for the pharmaceutical industry?
Awesome question. Thank you.
I think for us, I'm not sure if we're at that level yet to have that collaboration, but we do have a lot of stakeholders within our processes. So there is a lot of collaboration between different areas. But I think that's something that we need to look at, especially with the mid-management tool, the last component that we've developed. That seems to have a lot of traction in interest for usability. And like Jesse was saying, we learned along the way. That was the last component that we deployed, and it was deployed and built with usability in mind. So that was our first thought in building it. So that's why the benefits of it do show. That there is a strong interest for it across different areas.
Okay, I think, Gabe, that there's definitely that's a great idea and an opportunity to have some further discussion and seeing, is there value in there? So yes. I'll ask one last question before we end. If you had an opportunity to redo the project, and you stepped into it in the middle, but you're now enough and longer enough there, what would be something that you would do to improve into the future?
Like 2 things. Focus on user experience from the beginning. Sometimes projects are started with I guess some sort of vision in mind. Maybe you're taking a process, like as we did, from manual to utilizing it. And sometimes you don't think, like, if a user is using this system, how many steps will this user take to complete a certain process? And with that in mind, I think user experience will allow us to build a more user-friendly tool that we will be able to then deliver to our users, and that will definitely have assist our patients down the road.
Okay. Now?
I will just second what Jesse was saying. And I think you mentioned before, there has to be a balance between usability and process. And they go hand in hand, right? Sometimes the way things are done needs to change, and sometimes it's the other way around, right? So we need to make sure that what is the best way to develop a certain process to get to the end goal? What is the necessary result? And that's not an easy thing to determine, but that's really the end goal of what we're trying to do. So it's a delicate balance between the two.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So it's really, bring the users in early, but I think looking forward, there is nothing that's blocking you from actually improving the user interface today, or to the user, the user, the way and usability is being leveraged here.
Right.
And with that, there's a story, I don't know if everybody knows, but when the first Macintosh was actually put into user testing, they took it to a mall, and it was the Macintosh with the mouse. And most people took the mouse, put it on the floor, and used it as a pedal. Just didn't know, but they just put it in front of them and said, okay, fine, what do you do? And with that, I want to thank Jesse. Thank you so much, and thank you very much.
Thank
you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone.
And thank you.